Before I start this video, I just want to say that there's going to be parts in my engine bay that are like partially installed because I'm filming all these videos kind of at the same time so that I can get everything put in the place where it needs to be. And I know where to route all the lines and the coolant hoses and the oil feed lines and everything like that. So I'm filming my AOS video, my front mount intercooler video, and this rotated kit video all within like the same weekend kind of thing. So don't get confused if you look in this engine bay and you see a front mount kit that's kind of half installed with no blow off valve on it yet and an AOS that's half installed where I haven't routed the coolant lines or anything, because I got to get the turbo on before I route the coolant lines because of the expansion tank delete that I'm doing and the way I'm routing it from the water pump through the AOS to the turbo back to the head. So I just wanted to mention that before we get into this, and you guys are all confused because you already saw me install the whole front mount kit and the AOS. So what's going on, you guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, like I already said, we're going to be getting my ETS Rotated Turbo Kit installed. So that includes my up pipe, down pipe, the turbo, all the feed lines, the brackets, everything to get that turbo completely mounted up where it needs to go. So as you guys already just saw in my engine bay, I have the front mount kit partially installed at this point, and I have my AOS partially installed at this point. I just got everything mocked up to where it's going to sit so that then I know where I can set my turbo and I have enough space for everything to clear. So if we come over to my absolute mess of a table here, I have all my ETS parts piled up here, all the hose clamps, the V-band clamps, all the silicone couplers, the oil feed lines, all the gaskets, the filter, the wastegate, and here is my up pipe. Again, I got this ceramic coated by the Wheel Clinic here in Edmonton. I will link their Instagram down in the description below once again. They're a huge help when it comes to getting this stuff done, and they do an absolutely killer job. So I got my up pipe, my down pipe, and my screamer pipe all coated this Ceratoke ceramic black, just like I did on my Tomei headers. So first part of this install is going to be getting this up pipe installed. I taped off the bottom of it just so I don't scratch the piss out of the up pipe while I'm installing it, because it's a pretty tight space down there to fit a 3-bolt up pipe in between the engine and the subframe. So I don't know if I'm gonna have to lift the engine up to make it fit or not. I might have to unbolt the engine mounts and just jack the engine up a bit to get this to slide down there, because I made the decision of putting the engine in the car before I put the rotated kit on because my rotated kit was super back ordered. It took like 4 months to get here. So yeah, let's just jump straight into this install. First thing I'm gonna do is get this up pipe on. And the way I'm bolting this up to my Tomei headers is I'm gonna use the 3 bolts that came with the Tomei equal length headers to bolt the up pipe up. And then I'm also gonna be using the 3-bolt up pipe gasket that came with my Tomei headers as well. So I'm just gonna time lapse through this and then I'll show you guys exactly what I did once I get it in there. All right, now that we got the up pipe on, I did scratch it in a couple spots, but it happens. It's gonna be pretty hidden for the most part. There's gonna be this little bracket here that attaches to the bell housing. You just zip your 2 bell housing bolts out, slide the bracket on, put your 2 bell housing bolts in, and then you're gonna wanna tighten the up pipe on to your manifold first, and then you can get these 2 bolts in that hold that bracket on. And here is where the up pipe bolted to the manifold. This back bolt here really sucked to get at. I ended up putting vice grips on the Allen head of the bolt and then tightening it with a ratcheting wrench on the nut on the backside. And then the other 2 I was able to get Allen head on and tighten with a wrench. I did use this Tomei bolt smooth paste. All it is like copper coat. It's like an anti-seize type thing, just so that if I ever have to take that up pipe off again, the bolts aren't going to be seized on, because this bolt smooth paste is essentially, like I said, an anti-seize type of thing. And to get that up pipe on, I actually did have to take the 2 nuts off of the engine mounts, get the jack on the oil pan, jack the engine up a bit, just because that 3-bolt flange is a little bit too big to fit between the subframe and the engine. So just jack the engine up a bit and then you should be able to slide that up pipe down, no problem. Get all your bolts threaded in by hand, drop the engine back down, and then you'll have enough room to tighten up all 3 bolts on the up pipe. So now that we got an up pipe, next step is gonna be to get the turbo and the wastegate on. But before we get those on, we're gonna have to make sure we have the right wastegate spring in the wastegate, and we gotta get all the fittings onto my turbo. So first things first, we're gonna get this sexy ass turbo set up. I will mention that none of the fittings that I'm using here came with the kit. I did post an Instagram story explaining what happened with my turbo kit. Just to sum it up, I ended up getting sent a Precision Turbo Kit, but I don't have time to send the kit back, get another kit sent to me, because this kit took 4 months to get to me, so I'm just going to retrofit this Precision kit to fit this Garrett turbo. So I went out and bought all new fittings for this turbo, since Precision does not come with coolant fittings, because Precision turbos don't run coolant through them. So we got all new fittings. And also Precision turbos, all their fittings are standard thread, whereas Garrett turbos are all metric thread, so none of the fittings worked whatsoever. Another thing that didn't work work was the oil drain tube that bolts to the bottom of the turbo. The flange for the Precision is totally different from a Garrett, so I had to get a Garrett flange made and welded onto the drain tube that came in the ETS kit for Precision Turbo. All right, so I wanted to include this in the video just to show you guys all the shit that I had to go through to get this kit to fit. I'm at a welding shop right now, and my buddy Eric is absolutely unreal at TIG welding. He clutched up for me. He's getting this thing welded today. We already got the old V-band cut off, which was a huge pain, to be honest, to get it off. That probably took like an hour and a half to get the old V-band off, just because we didn't want to mess up the pipe on the inside. And now he's just inside cleaning up the outside diameter of the downpipe. We're gonna get my new Vibrant V-band welded on there. It's a V-band for the Garrett, I believe, G30s, GTX 35s. It's like a general V-band for a whole bunch of Garrett turbos. Today is Thursday, July. I don't even honestly know what day it is today. What day is it? It's the 22nd, July 22nd. And I think I started putting this kit together last week once I realized everything was messed up on the whole kit and all of the parts were wrong. So it's been a gong show, but I'm gonna get this stuff fabbed up. We're gonna get it in the car. She's gonna run. Eric, I trust you, buddy. These welds better be nice. Absolutely filthy. Oh, buddy, she's gonna handle all the boost. Oil slick V-band.
Plus 10 horsepower.
So yeah, this has been a crazy, hectic week, but we're getting it figured out. We're gonna get this shit together and she's gonna be a ripper. So first thing I'm gonna do on this turbo is get my coolant fitting set up. I just bought these little banjo bolts with some 1/2-inch push locks because all of the hoses are 1/2 inch. So I'll just be able to slide a 1/2-inch hose over here and hose clamp it nice. Then I got these banjo fittings. So there's gonna be 2 crush washers on either side and the coolant is gonna flow through those tubes there. So we'll get 1 crush washer on one side, 1 crush washer on the other, and we will thread it in. And I'm gonna have the fittings facing downwards because they're both going to be going, one's going to be going down to drain back to the head and the other one's going to be going down and to the AOS. That guy threaded on there. I'm not going to tighten it yet. I just want to get all of them on first. And let's get this banjo threaded on there just to make sure it works with my whole setup here. She's going to be tight, but I think that'll fit. I can get the hose in there. Holy smokes, is that ever tight? It's going to work. Flip this around and we'll get the other side threaded on. All right, so we got both coolant fittings on there and the oil drain is what bolts up to this flange on the bottom here. Okay, so just to give you guys a little comparison here on how much different the Garrett and Precision flanges are for the drain. The left here is Precision and this one is the Garrett. Bolt holes do not line up whatsoever, so I had to get that flange cut off and I got this Garrett one welded on and the gasket fits perfect. So since my buddy had to belt sand this to get it nice and flush after he welded it, I don't know how flush it actually is. It's not perfect from ETS. So I'm gonna put a little bit of silicone on the gasket just around the drain tube on both sides of the gasket. Not enough that it's gonna squirt past, just a little bit, just to help seal it. Like I said, I'm literally just gonna put a little tiny bit on there. Again, we don't want lots because there is a gasket there. I just want to help it a little bit. I don't want enough that it's gonna squeeze out or anything. I just want a little bit on there just to help. All right, now that we got her layered on there pretty thin, it's not going to squeeze out at all. I'm going to get her set on to the turbo there. My hands are freaking covered in silicone here, but which way did this go again? It was this way. Yeah, now we're gonna get this set on there and get these bolts started, hopefully without making a mess and without getting silicone on my brand new powder coat job here. That coolant fitting might actually be a little bit tight with this drain tube. We might have to take that coolant fitting off to tighten up this drain tube too. All right, now I'm gonna grab my 1/4-inch ratchet and a little 13 mil and just snug these up. Don't need to be overly tight. Just make sure you seat that gasket. Ooh, this one's gonna be rough. I might need to use a wrench. Oh, I can't even get a wrench in there. Can I fit this wrench? Ooh, I can fit a normal wrench on there. I wonder if I can still. Oh, that bolt literally just clears that flange for the hot side. I always leave the hot side loose so I can rotate it for when I'm fitting everything up. Snug. Double check the other side. Snug. All right, now our drain tube's on. All right, now that we got both coolant ones kind of hand tightened on, we don't have the crush washers crushed yet, and the drain pipe is on. We got to get this oil feed on. This is the one that comes for the Precision kit. It's, I don't know if you can see air through there, but you can see that it is wide open. There's no restriction whatsoever because Precisions obviously want a lot of oil flow because there's no coolant running through them. So the oil is the only thing that cools them. But on the Garrett, we actually need a feed fitting with a oil restrictor in it. So if you look inside this one, it is a lot smaller of a hole. And then when you buy these fittings from Vibrant, there's actually two other little fittings. One's a small one and one has a bigger hole. And I'm not gonna be able to show this on camera because it's so tiny, but I don't know, maybe you guys can see. The one on the left in my left hand here is the bigger one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the bigger one because I'm gonna want more oil flow. It's gonna go in the top of the fitting. You're just gonna thread it in all the way until she stops and then give it one little nice tug there, and then that's tightened in. Now that we've got the oil restrictor in there, we're going to get this feed fitting threaded on. Don't put any thread sealant or pipe sealant or anything on the thread. This is an AN fitting or metric fitting. It has this little tapered face on it, and inside of the turbo, you're not going to be able to see it, but there is a little piece that comes up into the tapered fitting to seal it. So just thread it in there, bone dry all the way, and then we are going to take a 13 mil ratchet and just snug it up. Again, you don't need to go too tight. Just get it nice and snug by hand. There probably is a specific torque for that, but I just got it right until it stops and gave her another snug. Now I'm gonna leave these coolant fittings loose until I get it on the car because I don't know if I'm gonna end up having to rotate them up or if the hose is gonna fit down, specifically because this oil drain pipe is insanely close to this, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get a coolant hose on here without it kinking on this drain pipe. Now, I got my V-band clamp here, ready to go. Most people put the wastegate on first, but I'm gonna get the turbo set on there first, just so I know how much room I have for everything. And then we're gonna see if we have enough room to get the wastegate on there with the turbo mounted up. So I'm gonna time lapse through it, and then I will explain to you guys how I got the V-band clamps on and how I set it up. Okay, so turbo is on, but I want to show you guys a couple things that I'm going to need to modify. You guys probably won't have to do this because your kit should all bolt up fine, but since I got the precision kit and I'm running a Garrett turbo, I have a couple issues. So since I got that oil drain re-welded, it is a little bit too long and it kinks the soft line too much where it connects to the head. See if I can show you guys what I'm talking about here. There is this soft line that goes to the oil drain on that side of the passenger head. Now, this turbo right now is sitting way off, and if I pull it over to where it needs to be, that hose down there, as I pull the turbo over, just starts to really kink. And right now, my turbo is sitting about where it needs to be right there. And as you can see, that hose is way too kinked and it is barely on the hard line that comes off the head. So I'm probably gonna trim this drain hose up about maybe a little bit lower about here, so that way the soft line doesn't have to flex so much to get to it. Another thing I'm noticing here is I don't know if they have a different little intercooler pipe here that comes with the rotated kit for a precision or for a Garrett, but this is the silicone hose that fits over that pipe, and I'll just show you guys real quick how it fits over this pipe. It's just absolutely swimming in it. So I'm gonna need to get either a different silicone hose coupler, or I might need to get a new pipe made for here, because if you look at how this sits, that turbo should be sitting right about there right now, and we are not even close to the intercooler pipe. One thing I did want to mention quickly too, before I get ahead of myself here, is the power steering lines and the engine harness. If you guys would have watched my engine harness build video, then you would have seen that I tucked the harness down that frame rail there. But if you didn't see that one, I'll show you real quick. I tucked my engine harness down the frame rail, down there. Usually the harness comes up here. Obviously with the turbo there, you can't do that. So I routed it down the frame rail, and then I also took the bracket that mounts right here off the power steering lines, and I zip tied them nice and tight to the strut tower there. Well, I zip tied them to the brake lines, but it's right against the strut tower, just to keep it away from the heat of the downpipe and the uppipe here a little bit. And yet another thing that is wrong with this kit, this is so frustrating to get sent parts and wait 5 months for stuff to show up, or 4 months, and then you get the wrong stuff. And in my order, I specifically said that I was running speed density, which if you check out my intercooler piping, clearly they got it right there, because there's a bung for an IET sensor, which I already have wired. But if you come over to my intake pipe here, and this isn't all installed, I was just mocking it up, trying to see what's going on here. This pipe should be long and go way down into the fender for speed density. And this air filter should be bigger so that it fits over the 4-inch pipe. But instead, they sent me a short hard hose, they sent me an adapter, and then they sent me the little bung here for the stock MAF sensor, which I'm clearly not running, because they sent me the speed density intercooler kit, but somehow in my order, they decided to send me a precision turbo kit with stock MAF when I said a Garrett turbo kit with speed density. So I already got these pipes coated because I just dropped them off there to get coated. I didn't even like look at them, which was dumb on my part. I get it, yeah, but I was kind of in a rush. And the other thing I wanted to show you guys quick, I have these oil feed lines run, but they're not hooked up yet. I was just trying to see where everything went. I got my drain hose fabbed up. I had to cut the hard line way back to about here. And then I had to run my own 5/8 soft line that hooks up to that little port down there that goes back into your head for the oil drain from the turbo. So I ran a 5/8 hose with a hose clamp down there with a soft 5/8 line all the way up to the hard line where I cut it about here, hose clamped it up top, and then I put the heat wrap that actually came with the IAG AOS because I didn't use any of it on the AOS. I put the heat wrap on that hose just because it is right next to the up pipe, just to keep the oil a little bit cooler when it's feeding back into the head. And then I'm probably gonna do the same thing with all the coolant lines that I run. Now, this is gonna break my heart to cut into a freshly powder coated intercooler pipe, but I gotta do it. That's the only way I'm gonna make this work. So what I did was I ran a Mopac here in Edmonton. It's like an auto parts supplier store. And I picked up a Performance World 90-degree bend silicone coupler that goes from 2.5 inch to 2 inch. 2 inch is gonna fit on the turbo, and then 2.5 is gonna fit on the intercooler pipe. So like I showed you guys, this obviously is not gonna work here. It's not even close to the right alignment. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut my intercooler pipe back here where it's straight. This 90-degree coupler is gonna go from the intercooler pipe up to the turbo, and it's gonna work. That's all that matters. It'll still look good. So I'm gonna go ahead and time lapse through me getting that intercooler pipe taken out, getting it cut, and then getting this mounted up so we can clock our cold side housing of the turbo properly. And then we can move on to all the fittings and lines and getting the downpipe in. All right, just gonna give you guys a little bit of an update here on what I need to do to make this work. So I have the pipe all taped up so I don't scratch the powder coat. And what I need to do is, excuse the absolute mess of a table here. I have shit all over the place. But what I did was I cut the widened end off of one end of the pipe, and then I cut it flush so that the pipe was straight at the other end. This piece is now garbage. I then took the piece that is widened and I shaved down the powder coat off of enough of the surface that I can weld this piece onto here. The reason I need this piece on there is you need that lip when you're putting a silicone hose on, or else if you just slide the silicone hose over top of this and then you clamp it down with the hose clamp, it's literally just gonna shoot the hose right off. It's not gonna hold. You need that little bit of a lip there in order to hold the hose on there. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this welded up, and then I'll show you guys the final product after. All right, we got her all welded up. Not the prettiest job, to be honest, but I ended up painting over the powder coat on the top side where the flange is to hold the hose on. But I pretty much just tacked it all the way around because I couldn't weld one full bead because the pipe is too thin. For a MIG welder, at least, we probably could have done one bead if we tigged it, but I think it turned out okay. The silicone coupler is gonna cover this whole part that's painted matte black here. Pretty much like that, so you're not even gonna tell that I ever cut this and welded it. And then the hose clamp's gonna squeeze right here and it's gonna seal it off. So now that we got this thing completely built, I'm gonna get the hose clamps on the silicone hose, get the pipe in there, and get the cold side of the turbo clocked properly so that it fits this 90-degree bend silicone hose that I bought. All right, so I got pretty much everything on the cold side mocked up. I got all the hose clamps tightened on these couplers here. And I got that little 6mm Allen head bolt to hold this pipe to the intake manifold. And then on this 90-degree silicone coupler that I put on there, I used one of their supplied 2.5-inch clamps. But then since my turbo is a 2-inch outlet on the cold side, I just got a regular worm clamp and tighten it up. So now the next thing I need to do for the cold side is I need to clock the actual housing of my turbo. And I'll show you guys what I mean right now. If I grab my oil drain, I can actually move the housing of the turbo. I don't know if you can see it there, but it's moving a little bit. So I want to clock it so that this oil drain is not insanely close to the up pipe. I want to clock it so it comes over a bit and so that your soft line isn't kicked too much. Your guys' oil drain will probably be clocked perfectly. Mine's not because I had to modify it because, like I said before, I got a precision kit, not a Garrett kit. So my soft line is a lot longer than your guys' is going to be. And you probably don't have to put this heat wrap on there, but I'm going to clock it to right about there. I got about a finger gap between the up pipe and the oil drain tube. And then once you get that that clocked to a spot where you want it to be, I might have forgot to mention this when you put on the turbo, leave all your bolts loose on the cold side and the hot side. And then once you get it clocked with that oil drain, tighten all the bolts up for your cold side, but leave the bolts loose on the hot side until you get your downpipe on. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the cold side of the turbo clocked, sitting properly the way I want it to be, and then we can start getting the downpipe on. And keep in mind, this whole time I'm doing this too, I have the V-band for the up pipe that connects to the turbo loose, just so that I can move the turbo around on the up pipe if I need to. And then once I get the downpipe on there and the exhaust pretty much down to the cat back, then I can tighten up all my V-band clamps. All right, so I went ahead and tightened all the bolts on the back of the cold side of the turbo. I didn't film it just because I felt like it was kind of pointless. There's just 6 13mm bolts on the back of the turbo that you just gotta snug up. And I got the cold side housing clocked now so that the oil drain is away from the up pipe. And now that that's all done, we can get the downpipe on. So I already got the V-band for the downpipe just sitting on the outlet of the hot side of the turbo, just so that then that way I can set the downpipe in here on the V-band and then get this V-band just snugged up enough to hold the downpipe on. This is probably gonna be an absolute bitch to do by myself, so if you guys have a buddy, get your buddy to come over and tighten up that V-band while you hold the downpipe in place. So I'm just gonna time lapse through this because if you guys watched any of my other videos where I put my headers on or anything like that, probably gonna be a lot of swearing involved and getting pissed off, so we'll just time lapse it. I don't know, maybe you guys wanna see that stuff, maybe it's funny to you, so you can be pissed off in the moment. We're just gonna time lapse through this. I'm gonna get the first part of the downpipe on, and then we can get the rest of the downpipe on after that. Never mind. That was actually a lot easier than I thought it was gonna be. So just to show you guys real quick, I got the V-band so that I can tighten the bolt up here so it's nice and accessible. My turbo blanket's gonna be covering most of this once I get it here anyways. So now that the downpipe's on, I left this V-band loose so that the downpipe can move. Now I'm gonna get that bottom section of the exhaust on, and then we can move on to getting the wastegate on. Usually people put the wastegate on first. The only reason I didn't is because, like you saw earlier in the video, I welded that other V-band on here, so I wanted to make sure that this pipe still fit and cleared everything before I put the wastegate on. So here is the next section of the pipe that we're gonna put in. It's got a bung for my AFR sensor, and it's got a V-band on one end, and then it's got the 2-bolt for my Tomei catback on the other end. Another thing I forgot to mention is if you guys have any copper coat or any type of anti-seize or anything, I got this Tomei bolt smooth paste that came with my headers. Pull it a little bit on the threads on the V-band so that if you guys are ever taking it off, it's just gonna make your life 10 times easier. All right, so this is gonna be really shitty lighting and angles again, but I got this pipe kind of mocked up. There's one little bracket right here with a 14mm bolt, I believe, that holds it on. And then we got our V-band here. I still just have it loose. It's not tightened up or anything yet. The pipes are misaligned. I gotta line them up and then tighten that up. But before I get this V-band tightened, I'm gonna leave the rest of this exhaust install to my next video, which is gonna be installing the Tomei. So I'm gonna leave that for now, and we'll hop back up top and get that wastegate mounted. Now, before we get this wastegate mounted, I'm gonna pull it apart just because I want to make sure what size spring is in it. I was supposed to get a tile wastegate with my kit, but like I said before, I got a precision kit. So we got a precision 46mm wastegate. It still has the same 44mm tile V-band on it. I won't have any issues with fitment on the V-band end of it, but I do want to make sure what size spring is inside of it. So precision gives you a whole chart here showing the natural color is 1.5 PSI, yellow's 3, red is 6, green is 9, blue is 18. So I'm going to pull this apart and make sure what size spring is in the wastegate. So we're going to start by taking out all the Allen keys along the side of the wastegate. They're all 4mm Allen keys. Now you're going to want to loosen these pretty evenly. That spring pressure is going to be pretty hardcore. Oh, maybe not. Oh, yeah, there she goes. Oh, hey-oh. Holy fuck, I did that so bad. All right, push down on this so we don't pull threads. Oh, I did that so bad. Whew, let's hope we didn't screw any threads up there. I don't think I did. If I did, we can retap them. But yeah, that's what the inside of the wastegate looks like. Oh man, I did exactly what I said not to do. I think I actually bent this bolt. Oh my God. Yeah, lesson learned. I meant to loosen them evenly, but I guess I left one in by accident. Might have to put that in the vise and straighten it out or get a new Allen key bolt. Oh my God. All right, so that was totally pointless. And we didn't need to take this part because we have a red and a green, which the green is 9 PSI, the red is 6. So that's 15 PSI. So they don't have any springs that add up to 14. So we're gonna put this back together this way. If you guys don't know what spring to run in your wastegate, talk to your tuner. They will let you know exactly exactly what spring they want you running in your wastegate. So I'm gonna try and get this back on, and I might need to do some work on that one bolt, but I'm gonna get all the other ones back in, and then maybe I'll tap the threads on that hole because that was not good. Well, I got the wastegate completely back together now. I gotta get the fittings on still, but use this as a learning lesson for you guys. Don't do what I did, or else you're gonna need one of these and one of these. A tap and a die. The thread pitch for the bolts in there is M5 by 0.8. So I had to re-tap the threads on the wastegate, and I had to run the bolts through the die after I straighten them in a vise. So don't do that, because that was not fun, but it's fixed now. All the bolts are in. I got them all tight. I'm not sure if there's a torque or not for them, but I'm just gonna take the 4mm Allen key and snug them all up by hand. Make sure you get them all nice and tight. You don't want that wastegate to explode while you're giving her the beans. All right, they're all tight. Now that we got the wastegate completely assembled, I'm gonna get my fittings put onto the wastegate for my boost controller. Precision wastegate comes with 2 T-fittings and 1 block-off plug. If you're running a 4-port boost control solenoid, I think you use the top one and both bottom ones. Don't quote me on that, but I do know if you're using a 3-port, you're gonna use 1 top one and 1 bottom one. So since I'm running the Cobb 3-port boost control solenoid, I'm only going to use 1 of the top ones and 1 of the bottom ones. Then we're going to put a block off plug in 1 of the other bottom ones. So first things first, you're going to grab this little banjo bolt here, get 1 of their supplied crush washers on one side of it. Then you're going to get your T-fitting on, grab another crush washer, put it on the bottom side of it, and then you are going to install it on the top here first. I'm not going to tighten that down yet because now I'm going to choose my other boost control solenoid plug, which is going to be this bottom one here. Again, 1 crush washer, banjo fitting, and then the other crush washer. Sorry if the camera gets a little bit shaky here. The camera's leaning on the table, and every time I bump the table, it makes the camera shake. So I apologize that I have not spent the time to go and get a tripod. I've been using hockey tape this whole time. Next, you're going to grab this block off plug with a crush washer on it as well. And then we're going to thread that into the 3rd port on the wastegate. Now, I'm going to get this block off plug tightened up, but I'm not going to tighten the 2 nipples here because I don't know where I'm routing it yet. So I'm just going to leave them all loose till I get it in the car, and then I can decide which one I want to use. So let's go get this thing mounted up. Actually, one more thing before I get it mounted up that I'm going to do is I'm going to get the screamer pipe put on there, just because then I won't have to deal with it when it's in the car. Just going to take this smaller V-band that they got here, take the nut off. We will clamp it around. I'm not going to tighten it. I'm just going to leave it sit loose. All right, get it set in like that. I totally did that backwards. The nut sits on this side. Gotta go this way. There we go. What? I did that backwards again? Now we can get this threaded in. Pretty sure this is another 4mm. Nope, what do we got? A 5. Yeah, it's a 5mm. I'm just gonna tighten it up a little bit. I'm not gonna tighten it up all the way because I'm probably gonna have to maybe rotate it a bit depending on where I want the V-band to be sitting so it doesn't hit anything or get in the way of anything. All right, there we go. I got it sitting loose enough to the point where I can rotate the screamer pipe. Now let's go get the wastegate on. All right, I'm gonna time lapse through this part just because I know I'm gonna fight with this like crazy. But just to show you guys, before you get the V-band on, make sure you get this little inside diameter of the V-band put together on the wastegate before you get it onto the up pipe. And then you can get it set on there, get your V-band clamp on, move it to the way you want it, and then tighten the V-bands up. All right, so now that I got the V-bands tightened on the wastegate on both sides, I have this one kind of orientated so I could get at the little Allen head from the top here with an extension and a ratchet. And then the other one I just got with a ratchet and a 5mm Allen key on the ratchet. Now there's no way you guys are gonna be able to see down there, but that external wastegate dump is so close to the transmission, you literally have to move it a little bit just to where it's barely not touching the transmission and not touching the downpipe on the other side. And I even left all my V-bands loose on the downpipe when I was doing this too, so I pulled the downpipe as far as it could go over, got the wastegate dump as far as it could go close to the downpipe and between the transmission. Then I tightened up the V-bands, and I'll show you guys more from under the car so you can see how ridiculously close this is. I don't know how good the lighting's gonna be. This is gonna be pretty hard to get, but it is stupid close to the transmission. But as long as it's not touching, I grab this wastegate and wiggle the shit out of it, and it will not touch the transmission. So I'm gonna say we're good where we're at there. On the downpipe side, again, ridiculously close to that V-band. But now that we got that wastegate dump run and it's sitting in a good spot. I'm gonna get the rest of the V-bands tightened up on the exhaust. So this one on the downpipe here, the one on the up pipe up there, and you can't see it from here really, but the other one on the downpipe that connects to the back of the turbo. I'm gonna do that part off camera because I don't think I'm gonna be able to film tightening all those up, but I'll just give you guys a little update once I get them tightened up. So a lot has actually happened since that last clip where I said I'd give you guys an update and then I kind of forgot about it because I was in the zone and I was going kind of hard, but I will show you guys everything I did, where I routed hoses, and what I did once I got those V-bands tightened up. So once you get the downpipe V-band, the uppipe V-band, and the other V-band tightened up, your turbo should be clocked 100% properly for your intake to fit here and your outlet to be good. Everything should be sitting perfect at this point. Once everything's sitting perfect, I went ahead and tightened up all of the bolts for the hot side, just a bunch of 13mm ones. Gonna be honest, the one on the bottom right next to the oil drain sucked, but I was able to get in there with the open end of a 13mm wrench, and I had to use a stubby one. Then I also tightened the 13mm on the cold side of the turbo. I did that before, but I had to do it again just to move the cold side around to clock it properly so that my intake would fit. Then once I got all those bolts tightened up, I actually ran both of my coolant lines, and I'll show you guys how I ran those real quick. So with this expansion tank delete, what we did, and I went over this like a million times already, but we're going straight from that water pump outlet, looping to the AOS, and then from the AOS, we have this line here coming straight up to the turbo. On that side, I got a little 1/2-inch push lock fitting that I bought to fit on the turbo, and then I got my 1/2-inch hose on there with a hose clamp, and then I got my 2 crush washers on either side of the banjo. You guys, if you're buying this kit, should have the specific fitting that ETS supplies with the kit, but again, I got the precision kit, like I said before, so I had to go out and buy different fittings. Then once we get that coolant line coming to the turbo from the AOS, I have the coolant line on the other side, same thing, it's a 1/2-inch push lock little banjo bolt fitting, both crush washers on both sides, and then I have it hose clamped to that banjo bolt, running a 1/2-inch hose, and I put the heat wrap on it that came with the AOS just because it is sitting close to the up pipe, and that goes down to the fitting right on the back of the passenger side head right there. And I put a hose clamp on that one too to make sure there's no leaks, because it is going to be pretty high pressure coolant draining back into the head. Now, since I got both of those coolant lines run, my last step for feeding the turbo with fluids is going to be my oil feed line. Now, the first thing you guys are going to do if you're getting this oil feed line installed is the factory oil feed line has this little fitting on here with the banjo that goes to the stock location turbo, and you're going to take this off, and I'll show you where it sits. So this fitting, if you're going from stock location to rotated, sits right under my turbo here and threads on to that hard line right there. You're going to take this off, and then ETS supplies you with this little adapter fitting that comes with the kit. All you're gonna do is thread that on to the OEM hardline fitting right there. Once you get this on, when you wanna snug it up, make sure you use a wrench on both ends. If you only try and tighten this end, you're just gonna kink that hardline and you can mess it up pretty good. So first I'm gonna get that tightened up. And then ETS also supplies this really nice steel braided line. And this straight end is gonna thread into your adapter fitting that you just put down there. And then this 90-degree bend is gonna thread into your oil feed fitting that you had to install on the turbo on the top. So I'm just gonna time lapse through me getting that oil feed line on. And then after that, our turbo is 100% done. The next thing I need to do is install all of my boost lines for my Cobb 3-port boost solenoid and run them to the wastegate where I put all those little fittings on. And I'm not sure how I'm gonna route those yet, but we'll figure it out. We always do. All right, there we go. Last line for the turbo is installed. We got that adapter fitting going to the steel braided line. I ran the steel braided line in behind the coolant line that has the heat wrap on it. And then I zip tied it to the power steering line right there. And then it comes up nice and clean right to my oil feed fitting on the top of the turbo. Now that we got that all made, my last step to this rotated kit before honestly I can start the car is I got to run all of my boost lines for my boost control solenoid to the wastegate and to the turbine housing. So my install is going to be way different than your guys's probably is, unless you guys want to use this idea. I kind of found it and thought it was pretty cool. So as you guys already know, if you've been following the build, I shaved my intake manifold. So there is no more mount for the boost control solenoid on the top of the intake manifold. So I need to mount it in a different place. Then I came over here and I was looking at my mount for my ABS module. And then there's a bracket there that this harness from factory body clips to, and it's usually facing the passenger side of the car. What I did, I don't know if you can can even see that. But I took some pliers and I bent it 90 degrees out so it's facing straight with the front of the car. And then what I think I'm gonna do with my boost control solenoid, I might need to switch around the fittings on here. But what I wanna do, since my boost control solenoid plug is right here on my wire harness, I'm gonna unplug my ABS module here just so it gives a little bit more visibility. What I think I could do is, since this boost control solenoid mounts with one bolt that threads into the back of it, what I wanna do is stick the bolt through that mount and then mount my boost control solenoid right here. Then I can run all my lines right through here to the turbo and to the wastegate. So again, this video is probably like over 25 minutes long. I don't know how long it's gonna be, but it's probably pretty long by now. So again, I'm gonna time lapse through me getting that boost control solenoid mounted, running all the lines, and then I will update you guys after I'm done. Before I run the lines, I do wanna say one thing. Garrett turbos do not come with a vacuum fitting on them. There is a little plug down there, but that plug is for the turbine speed sensor. If you're running one of those, I'm not. But there is one little flat spot here that Garrett actually puts there so you can drill and tap threads in to build your own vacuum fitting. So once again, I'm gonna be the guy that puts shit together and then tears it apart again 5 times over. Now I'm gonna take the cold side housing off the turbo so I can get it on a bench and I can make sure that I drill and tap that straight and that I scratch the powder coat that I got coated on the turbo the least amount that I can. So like I said before, let's just time lapse through all of this. We are finally done for this video, at least. I'll show you guys what I just did with all of those wastegate lines and the boost control solenoid. So first, let's talk about this nice and creative little mounting spot for this boost control solenoid. It's nice and hidden. You can see it if you really want to look. You can see it says Cobb right there. So if you guys are questioning where to run your lines and everything like that, this is going to vary whether you're running speed density or stock MAF. And if you're running stock MAF, you're going to have a line coming off the top port of your boost controller to the intake, whereas with speed density, that top port's just going to be vented atmosphere. But I'll show you guys what I mean on the boost controller itself. So to start at the boost controller, it's going to be very hard to see, but what I actually did was I mounted it to the little bracket for the ABS wiring harness. I bent the bracket out, mounted it there just like I said before, and then I had to switch the fittings. This 90-degree fitting comes on that side of the boost controller, and then this straight fitting comes on this side. So I just swapped them side to side, put some Teflon tape on the threads. They're just an 11 mil little nut. You got to use an open end wrench to move them. Then I put a vacuum line on this one, ran it 90 degrees right under the boost controller. Then I put a vacuum line on that one. It goes straight out. They both come out in behind the mount for the ABS module there. And then I got them all zip tied together, nice and clean, away from the engine block. Zip tied them pretty much along my IET sensor wire that I ran. And then right here, I got a T in the line that goes to the bottom port of the wastegate. And that T has one line that comes up directly to the turbo. And I'll go over how I built this in a sec. Then the other line doesn't have a T in it. It just routes straight back up to the top port on the wastegate. So just to clarify this with actual port numbers on the Cobb boost controller, if you guys are running it, or if you guys are running a Grimspeed one, I'm sure it's pretty similar, but talk to your tuner to make sure this is how he wants you to run them. What I did, and maybe I'll pop a little diagram up on the screen here for a sec, just so that you guys know with a little picture how I routed this, but minus the intake one, obviously, because my intake one is vented to atmosphere. So port 2 is the left port on the boost controller, and port 2 literally just runs directly to the top port on the wastegate. Then port 1, I ran it straight to here. I have that 3-nipple T in. It tees off, comes to your positive pressure source, which I'm using the turbo. You could use a nipple on the manifold or something like that, but then that's not going to be your true boost. That's going to be your loss after you lose it all through the intake piping and everything like that. You're not going to lose much, but this accounts for no loss, having it right at the turbo. It is your true boost pressure directly from the turbo. So that's why I went there, and that's why I also mounted my boost pressure sensor there too for my gauge. So on that 3-nipple T, like I said, the one comes up to the turbo, your positive positive pressure source. And then from the T, it goes straight to the bottom port on your wastegate. And then the other port on the wastegate, I just blocked off. And also, just like I said, when I was assembling this, make sure you get both crush washers on both sides of the nipples that you put on the wastegate. I just hand tighten them up with a 1/4 inch ratchet and a 10 mil. They should be good to go. So now let me explain this whole setup here on my turbo. So what I did is these Garrett turbos have a little circle there that's basically a spot to drill and tap threads for a vacuum nipple. So what I did was I drilled and tapped 1/8 NPT threads into the turbo. I then got this little block here that has a male end that threads into the turbo housing, a little female end on the bottom here that I threaded my male end of the boost sensor into, and then another female end on this side that I threaded a 1/8 NPT vacuum nipple into, which is the source for my boost controller. So now coming out of this, I have my boost sensor reading the true boost of the turbo in the compressor housing, and then I have this reference point for the electronic boost control solenoid directly from the compressor housing as well. Yeah, it's kind of ugly having gold and everything else is black and red and everything, but honestly, I think it came out super clean and it's functional. So that's the biggest point of it. And then last thing, I guess, is gonna be the boost controller connector. I have mine sitting right on the side of the harness here, specifically because when I built my harness, I left a whole bunch of wire showing for this boost controller connector. I knew I wasn't gonna be mounting it up there. I knew it was gonna be somewhere over here, so that's why I got it over here, and I'm just gonna route it under my power steering line directly to the connector on the boost controller. But I still need to put that braided loom on this wire, so I'm not gonna plug that in yet. And that's honestly probably gonna be it on this one. This video is gonna be super, super long, and if you guys have made it to this point in the video, thank you guys for watching. I'm gonna be honest, out of all the videos I saw on YouTube from Devin Amelia, Bader Built, all those guys, they make videos on how to install this stuff, but they always forget small things like where to route your feed line, your return line, everything like that, your coolant fittings, all that stuff is always, there's always little chunks missing. So I tried to cover as much in detail as I could on this install. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments. I'll cover it in another video. There was points in this install where I got a little bit carried away and I started just installing stuff, but I made sure I went over it after I got it on the car. So I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video because this took a long ass time to do and to film everything. I'm still new to the whole YouTube thing, so filming is pretty hard for me. It makes installs take a lot longer. Like this whole install was probably the course of 2 to 3 weeks just because I had to source out different parts and find different flanges and find different fittings because like I said before, I got sent a precision kit, not a Garrett kit. So I had to modify a whole bunch of shit to make this work. The one coupler that I am worried about on this is this outlet one right here. It is kind of kinked and I did have to pull it up to get the hose clamp on to hold it on, but I'm gonna go buy a spare coupler just in case on the dyno that blows off. We can just swap it out real quick and I won't lose $1,000 on the dyno. Yes, $1,000, that's how much dyno tunes cost. I don't know, maybe I'm getting ripped. You guys let me know. That's what it costs for me. So I got the base map loaded in the car now. I'm pretty much ready to start it. All I gotta do is run those 2 gauges and the 2 sensors. I honestly could start the car without running either of them, but we're gonna wait because we want that exciting first start video. So I think this is the 3rd time I've said this, but that's gonna be it for this one. I talk too much. Stay tuned for that first start video. I'm so fired up for this thing to start. So peace out, you guys. I will catch you in the next one. She's gonna run, baby.